Hi, my name's Ian Wallace. I call myself the Messed Up Counsellor, which is quite an intriguing name. And the podcast you're about to see is one of many, and we've been doing about a year now. So you can look back and see all the things we've talked about with guests and on my own over the process. A lot of the information I use in the podcast initially came from the first book I wrote in 2011. Why do we do that? What do we do about it? And that came out and was the basis of all my learning, understanding at that time, which is going back a few years now. And that process of understanding how the world works for people, how we can alter, change, and adapt it, was kind of what it was there to do at the initial stages. I've made that now an audiobook as well, so it's available on Amazon as an audio file that you can check out and you can download to your heart's content, and hopefully that will be helpful. In the podcasts, we're trying to look at all sorts of things about human interactions, human dynamics, the world, and how we might understand it more or change it more. So it gives you lots of ideas and tools in order to think about and look at different ways of being or dealing with things. And hopefully that brings people together and makes people more able to connect and communicate. Lots of topics. If you ever want to connect to me, just obviously drop me a comment on the podcast and I shall try as much as possible to reply. And if you've got any ideas of things that we might want to use on the podcasts, then please let me know. My name's Ian Wallace. Thanks for looking and thanks for listening around us. Hi, welcome to Ian Wallace, the Messed Up Counsellor. What I'm contemplating today is something that we see an awful lot of in the counselling room, certainly when we're working in certain situations, scenarios around health or well-being, certainly within hospitals or doctors' surgeries, which I've done quite a bit over the years. Diagnosis of an illness. When we're looking at diagnosing illnesses, the clients that we see, they can either go one of two ways. It can make us feel more safe and secure because somebody knows what's going on. Somebody could diagnose. Or it can make us feel very unsettled, dependent on our way of seeing the world or reacting to the world. If we're given a diagnosis that is rock solid, they're backed up by evidential proof, not just somebody's ideas, then that makes us feel more safe and secure in the diagnosis. If the diagnosis is somebody's opinion, which or can't be backed up with proof, say like a blood test or a scan or something like that, then that makes us feel much more vulnerable, much more uncertain. When a diagnosis is made for the person that's obviously got the illness or the medical situation or mental health situation, it can give us comfort sometimes. It can make us aware that, yes, we're not mad, we're not daft, we're not wrong, we're not feigning it, we're not kind of doing something that's not understood by other people. We're moving through a process of clarification, a process of this makes sense because I've always felt that way. Now, the problem with some diagnoses is that it tends to be something that people can't necessarily give you rock solid ideas about because there is no way of testing it. There's no way of guaranteeing it, but it is something that a consultant can use their experience, knowledge, professional process in order to give you an idea of what it is in their opinion. Now that can be mind-blowing. Definitely if you weren't aware of it or if you didn't understand it, it can massively change your world. It can make it so the world basically drops apart. and the things that you thought, the stuff you understood, isn't going to be the way you thought it was yesterday, today. And it can be that literal. In one moment, the world can change, and everything that you understood or thought about or knew can be completely cleared away. In those moments of that major restructuring of your ideas, your world, your understanding, there's an awful lot of trauma, could be. There'll be a process which we explore in grief and loss of denial. It's not happening to me. I need a second opinion. I need to have a test. I need to do this. I need to do that to get some collaboration of knowledge that makes it more firm and more solid. But in that process of massively changing your world, and literally the day has completely changed, there's no way anybody can prepare you for that. Not in a million years. Because it is very much a personal process as to how that person works or does not work their world, in how they react to that news, that idea. And the people around them, because obviously they have been affected by that diagnosis as well, not just the person who is having the diagnosis, because their world may have massively changed and they may not understand what tomorrow's going to bring, how that's going to rearrange their world. So we can go one of two ways, as most things really. It can give us comfort, or it can completely devastate us. And nobody will know how it's going to work until that moment. You can't necessarily prepare yourself fully for those ideas, those discussions, those contemplations of what may or may not happen now. And nobody can diagnose to a point where they can give you absolute 100% guarantees. They can only give you best guesses a lot of the time. And how you can process those best guesses depends on all sorts of things. It depends on your own mental security, mental stability. It can be a physical thing, dependent on the diagnosis and what the diagnosis is. We can't, as I've said, preempt how we will react to anything, really, to be fair, unless we've reacted to the same thing before and we've gone through a process of an experiential situation that we can cast our mind back to and understand what happened last time. But most things don't happen like that. Most things are just earth-shattering. For, as I say, not just ourselves, the diagnosis that's come about, but for the people around us, the people who care about us, the people who interact with us, who connect to us. Because a diagnosis doesn't just affect the person that's been diagnosed, it affects everybody connected to them. And sometimes the focus is on the person, and that's how it should be. But they don't take on board all the other interactions that person has and the support that they will need going through this process. Because one person is not an island, usually. We are usually socially connected, family connected, genetically connected, biologically connected to other people. So you may have a diagnosis that, and if it's genetic, that then has to be checked out by the rest of the people who are biologically connected or genetically connected, should I say. So it may be that that piece of information, that diagnosis, then kind of radiates out. Families might need to be checked for certain conditions. Situation scenarios might need to be explored more fully. So you may have to give other people, your family, your kind of people around you, that genetically and biologically connected, to say, well, you need to go get this checked out because I've found this about myself. So this process of diagnosing for the medical or mental health professional who is diagnosing, the person in front of them obviously is the person being diagnosed. But there is a whole range of other things that will now be reactions and actions of that. That person in front of you is not your concern. It's not. They're not going to be involved in the rest of the family. They're not going to be involved in their friends. They're not going to see them maybe ever. They will need to be checked out by other people who can then diagnose. So when we're looking at these situations, we need to have an understanding that it's not just the person in front of you. It's anybody and everybody connected to that person. There's a wider system that needs to possibly be supported, possibly looked after, possibly checked, diagnosed, tests done, that is going to be affected by what you're saying. These processes that we may or may not go through, and diagnosing is becoming much more a defined understanding nowadays with scans and tests and ways of exploring. So there's a lot more understanding happening about people's bodies, about people's minds than ever there was 20 years ago. And that's developing every day, every week, every month, every year. So the more we could diagnose, the more this is going to affect other people. And the more we need to think about that. We need to think about the wider aspect of that diagnosis, of how other people may or may not be affected by it. And looking at that in family systems or friend systems or anything really of a connection, then having conversations with the person that you're diagnosing the situation with about these other interactions may be helpful, about how they're going to explore that, how they're going to work with that, share that, how it will affect relationships, families, friendships, those kind of things, is something that we, certainly within the counselling world, we would do. Because even just opening up those conversations, making reference to them, is helpful. Because the person that's being diagnosed, obviously, that's the major concern for them, is themselves at that moment in time. They don't normally think at that moment in time about other people. They normally think about how this is going to affect my world, my life. They don't look at how my relationships might be affected by it initially. They sometimes usually do come to that understanding, but it's not the same at the same time, should I say. So as we're moving through that process of new world, new ideas, new ways of looking at things, we need to be more open to those conversations. Now, sometimes people will say to me, I don't want to tell anybody. I don't want to share that news, that idea of my diagnosis, which is absolutely fine, not a problem. That's their choice, and you need to respect that choice. And we're not going to tell anybody, certainly within the counselling fraternity, because of confidentiality. We don't say anything about anybody out of the counselling room. But it would be helpful to have conversations with them about how that's going to impact on other people. What is not telling going to do? What is the not sharing going to achieve? reaction, interaction, because that will help them to make maybe the same choice. I'm not going to tell anybody, but at least it will give them an idea of those choices and what the inevitable outcomes may or may not be. And opening up that discussion is definitely healthy and helpful. Because most people, if they love somebody, care about somebody, they do want to be able to support them and help them. And if they don't have that piece of information, then it's very hard to do, because they don't know what that outcome might look like. So the people who've been diagnosed, it is helpful to talk to others, usually, and sharing with others, because the diagnosis itself could make it very hard to connect, to be around others or connecting to others. It kind of isolates us. And that's a hard thing to do when you've been diagnosed with something. To share it, to talk about it, to explore it. And I'm not saying it's right for everybody. Obviously, you have to make your own mind up and your own choice. But if you can share it, talk about it, normalise it in a sense, and then talk and share with other people who have similar conditions, that isn't an easy process usually, but it is one that can be massively supportive. Certainly in people who understand what you're going through, understand what you're experiencing, understand the what next, the outcomes, the processes that may or may not engage. So we can be pre-warned, pre-armed, prepared, in a sense. That's never easy for anybody, and I don't see these as easy conversations for anybody to have usually. There's a lot of soul searching, a lot of what ifs, what happens, Pandora's box kind of thing. Once I open the lid and I let it out, what happens to it? How do people react to it? And nobody can tell you what to do with that. Nobody can give you that this is the way to do it, because consequences from anything are very personal. And sometimes you have to do a lot of thought about what that next step looks like and what are the consequences, what are the actions, reactions of that, and how you move forward. And because it's a very individual assessment, everybody has to look at it from their own individual ideas. That initially is going to be the way you probably work with it. That ideas of thoughts of what happens if, what happens when, do I, don't I, can I, can't I. Whole range of processes that you'll go through. If you can work with it, if you can share it, if you can bring people in, obviously the people you trust, the people you feel comfortable with, then at least you're not on your own. At least you can hopefully share those fears, worries, concerns. What happens if? And for some things, there is no positive outcome. There is no, it's going to be okay. Some things, no, it's not going to be okay. And it is going to majorly affect your world and your life and the people around you. Nobody can give you guarantees. Nobody can give you ideas of what that might look like, I'm afraid, because it is very individual. But if you can reach out even just to somebody who is professionally trained to listen, such as a counsellor, therapist, then at least you can have those conversations outside your head. You can have them in a way that makes it easier to understand what those possible reactions could be because of the reaction you're getting in the room when you tell somebody. That will inform you whether or not it is something that can be shared, talked about, discussed. So try, if you can, if you're looking at this or listening to this and these things are happening for you or for somebody close to you, try and engage with some kind of conversation, or at least an exploration that there can be a conversation that's okay, that's accepted, even if there is no guarantees of outcomes. That you can have those conversations, you can share, you can open that dialogue up. Or, as I've said, find somebody, some kind of support, help, some kind of charity, counselling that understands the process in order to share it. Because if you keep it to yourself, then pretty much it won't necessarily be the most helpful outcome. But I get why people do it. There is hope, there is help, there is support for most things. Might not change the outcome, but it'll mean that the journey is a lot easier to cope with, usually. And other people with skills and abilities can help you on that journey. There's a wider aspect for most people of support. Hopefully that made sense. Hopefully it will be something that you feel more able to look at, if not talk about, and to think about, and it's given you ideas. If you are going through those situations, then please try to reach out to somebody and to something that will understand, help. Be okay. My name's Ian Wallace. Take care. Look after yourselves. Hi, thanks for listening to the podcast, and hopefully it made sense and was interesting for you. Please subscribe, like and share. With the podcasts, you never know who will be helped by the things we talk about, things we share. We don't normally tell people our problems, but by sharing it and helping other people to understand things. The book Insecurity, It's All About Me, is also available now through Amazon. And it gives you an understanding of what drives insecurity, how insecurity works within our human dynamics, and how you can get a much more secure connection with people. It gives you lots of ideas and thoughts, which is really good. So thanks for listening. Subscribe, like, share, hit the button. And if you've got any comments, please give me them, and I'll do my best to answer them. Thanks very much. Take care.